Życzymy Państwu przyjemnej podróży.
Good afternoon once again, and sorry for interruption with the video. Welcome once again to this important discussion about the spread of disinformation. As I already started, I'm very happy that we are actually having this discussion because, as we all know, disinformation poses a significant threat to our democratic values, not only in our region, but also worldwide, by undermining trust, attacking the foundation of democratic values, and also manipulating opinions. My name is Natália Tkáčová. I work as a project manager for Friedrich Naumann Foundation office in Prague, and I'm very honored that today we can discuss this important topic with true experts from the field and also our distinguished panelists who I would like to introduce to you. First, we have here Mr. Peter Kreko, who is director of the Political Capital Institute in Budapest, social psychologist, disinformation expert with a focus on the psychological drivers of belief in disinformation and the impact of political institutional context. He's also an associate professor at ELTE University. Welcome. We're also happy to have here Ms. Maia Mazurkiewicz, who is an expert on countering disinformation and behavioral changes. She's also president of PZU Foundation, co-founder of Alliance for Europe, and host of the TV show Anatomy of Disinformation, which can be actually watched on the TVP and also YouTube. We're also very happy to have here Mr. Roman Wieliński, who is first Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Gazeta Wyborcza, one of the most influential and most significant daily newspaper in Poland. And last but definitely not least, we are very happy to welcome here Mr. Krzysztof Kwiatkowski, who is lawyer and former Minister of Justice of Poland, former Public Prosecutor General and President of the Supreme Audit Office. He's also former Senator of the Republic of Poland. Thank you for coming. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and welcome once again. Our discussion today will focus on the key actors behind disinformation and the mechanism of the disinformation campaigns. Because while much attention has been focused on analyzing the disinformation narratives, it's also equally crucial to delve into the motivations driving these campaigns and also the ecosystems that actually sustain them. This discussion basically aims to provide an understanding of the evolving nature of disinformation and highlighting its organizational dynamics. Of course, we will also try together find some solutions and strategies to combat and counter disinformation. Okay, let's start with the first general questions for our panelists. Who are the primary actors behind disinformation and what are the motivations? Are the main spreaders of disinformation still media outlets that pose themselves as alternative media, or has it changed? Is it social media, politicians, other left or right-wing politicians, or maybe also newly emerging disinfluencers and so-called freedom fighters? Maia, please, I would start with you. How's the situation in Poland?
Thank you so much. While talking about disinformation actors, I would rather start from distinguishing it for the foreign influence, and that's called FIMI, so the foreign interference and manipulation. And in here we very much see, especially in Poland, countries like Russia, but in general in the global sphere, China and Iran are very much active as well. And then we also see, obviously, the internal actors, which are much harder to distinguish, because, again, while we are talking about disinformation and disinformation actors, we very much kind of seeing the narrative of disinformation actors trying to attack defenders and say that there is a change for the defense, and they're trying to kind of say that it's a thing for the freedom of speech. Well, it's not about the freedom of speech, and that's exactly the situation that we are having. There is mass information. It's a huge change of the situation in the media, and every single person is having so much different information that's unable to fact-check everything. So that's where the disinformators or the actors that are using disinformation are landing with their TTPs, as it's called, so tactics, techniques, and procedures. And I would say that that's the primary goal and target of those actors as well, to bring destabilization and polarization of various countries where they are active in.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for that. And now I would like to ask Mr. Krzysztof Kwiatkowski if you agree with everything that has been said here, or do you have anything to add when it comes to disinformation actors in Poland and the evolving nature of disinformation?
Przyznam, że miałem troszkę inny pomysł, że mówić o
I had a
dezinformacji
different
nie
idea to talk about disinformation not in the context of Russian disinformation, because it's a delicate issue for politicians. The goal of disinformation, these goals can be diverse: disintegration of society, eliciting fears among the society, and apart these negative objectives, there are some positive goals by inciting fear to achieve a larger goal, which is a subsequent objective compared to this first goal. Now let me swim in safer waters for me. The examples of disinformation that reach us at the level of international relations, there is disinformation at the international level. I would like to quote these examples because for us they are very interesting. We are facing a lot of disinformation addressing us from Eastern countries in different areas. First, to elicit fears, general fears. For example, there was a piece of information for many years that Ukraine is preparing for dirty war because there is the full-scale aggression from Russia in Ukraine, and it was about eliciting fears, causing fears in our society. Second, there is a different narrative which is used by Russia, and this disinformation also influences our situation. It is weaker in Western countries, but in Poland, among these negative emotions, we face anti-Russian sentiments. So this disinformation is concealed much better compared to Western European countries. How do they implement these actions, Russian disinformation, for example? Not only in Poland, but in many countries, they are quite effective in using historical resentment. And in this case, Russian disinformation in Poland focuses on difficult aspects of history. A simple example. Consciously, part of this disinformation is the use of fears that first there is the primary disinformation created by Russian propaganda. Now it is used in political discourse. As part of political discussion, the largest party political calls Bodnarites because Bodnar is the surname of the Minister of Justice, but associations are with Banderites. So Banderites, they are called similar to Banderites, and it has very strong sentiments in Poland because it's about Volyn massacre, where 10,000 Polish citizens were killed. So we can see disinformation, eliciting fears, political goals interrelation of narratives, domestic narratives and foreign narratives, and political forces here in Poland referred to these fears and disinformation, which were initially generated in a different way. For me, a classical example is diverting attention from important issues and focusing on minor issues, and we have dozens of examples of that. A stable, constant element of disinformation that influences Western society, and we listen to undermining of the deeds of the authorities which were democratically elected. If I want to be rude, I would say that it is correlated to the activities of certain political milieus which undermine the importance of constitutional bodies. But I don't want to be rude, so I'm not going to quote these examples. As part of these disinformation examples, what else can be observed? A stable element of disinformation is social polarization as an objective. If you want to reach a goal which is not based on fact, if polarization is strong in a society, you drive a wedge between different social groups, and they use emotional analysis rather than rational analysis, so fake news are disseminated much faster and better. And technical element disinformation uses the agents of influence, classical agents of influence, or in Poland we call them sometimes useful idiots, which are under manipulation of certain propaganda, but they don't have a given task. They duplicate, repeat certain tasks. Thank you.
Ja bym tylko się bardzo szybko odniosła do jednej rzeczy, która bardzo często dużo ekspertów i dużo osób powtarza i mówi, że my w Polsce jesteśmy tacy odporni na rosyjską dezinformację.
We are not liable to Russian disinformation, that we are resistant to Russian propaganda and disinformation. Russia wants us not to like Ukrainians and Ukraine, and social attitudes towards Ukrainian refugees has declined dramatically. When we compare us to other countries in the region, the Origin Euroactive survey was conducted that showed that in February 2022, 94% of Poles were in favor of accepting Ukrainian refugees, and now it's only 53%. We can see that we are not resistant to Russian disinformation. I would say that a wise person can agree to a mistake. You have persuaded me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your insights and for the discussion that you already started between each other. But now I would like to ask Mr. Roman Wieliński, if you, of course, again, agree with everything that has been said. I think that we can maybe all agree with this, but do you think that the situation has or has not changed with recent developments such as COVID-19 and also war in Ukraine? Because, for example, in Czech Republic, it had actually a huge impact on the disinformation actors spreading conspiracy theories and fake news, as we sometimes call them, because it used to be mainly about the alternative outlets or the so-called alternative outlets. But with the COVID-19 war in Ukraine, it has really changed dramatically. And now it's, I would say, play out of many, disinfluencers, freedom fighters, so-called, and also useful idiots that Mr. Kwiatkowski was mentioning. So what do you think?
Thank you for this question. I will speak Polish because we start to speak Polish. Sorry. Ponieważ sytuacja oczywiście jest dużo gorsza.
Well, the situation is much worse compared to that of 8 years ago. And the reason I mentioned the situation from before 8 years is Russian disinformation played an important role. The American elections, there was an FBI investigation which clearly demonstrated the extent of Russian disinformation. And I must say it was quite clever. Grini Prigozhin, deceased now, the former leader of Wagner group, who did dirty work for Putin, also in Ukraine, who wanted to make a small coup in Russia. It's not clear what happened. He was shot, as you are aware. Many years ago, he established an institution in Petersburg, in a nice tenement building, and it was called an Agency for Internet Research. A very innocent name. And Prigozhin made a lot of money on supplying poor quality food to Russian schools. And he made a favor to Putin. And that was a great troll farm. And he would employ students who were fluent in many different languages. And they were required to enroll or to become parts of different groups, like anti-vaccination or anti-federal tax in different countries. And there are quite many in the United States. So those people did not say Putin is fantastic. No, they would write, let's not pay taxes. Vaccines are not very effective. So this is how they worked. Apart of obviously from stealing emails from, say, Hillary Clinton's staff. That was quite a clever move also, because it was via a French portal. And thus they helped Trump. So now the situation is much worse, and I need to refer to the current situation. More people nowadays work in the PR segments than in the media. So fact-checking is getting weaker. It's becoming less important. Nowadays, the most popular TV in the world, BBC World, has about 1 billion viewers. Facebook has 3 billion members. What's YouTube's reach? 2.2 billion. TikTok has more than 2 billion. So this favors disinformation. There's a great article from several years ago in a Science, a prestigious publication. And it's about the fact that fake news spread 6 times faster than facts because they are attractive. And they are spread through incredible stories. And these are the stories that we find on internet portals. And I will kill everybody who says social media. These are not media, but they don't want to be called media because media are regulated by the European Commission. So maybe we should call them media. Well, but it's big business. Both Google and Facebook, they tell us how they fight and prevent disinformation. That's BS. That's not true. It's a great business opportunity for them because then information spreads so quickly. They get so many clicks that it's a perfect model for them to use. So nowadays we live in the world in which many global catastrophes happened, like the COVID, which actually ruined our life, and with the war in Ukraine. There's no war, it's Russian aggression in Ukraine. In Poland and in Europe, we are the target of Russian disinformation. Like this Institute of Internet Research, it's still in operation in Petersburg. But there's also units of Russian intelligence fully operational in Poland. They have great specialists in disinformation. Recently, the solution of doppelganger, which was they created fake sites of true media. Also, Our Daily was the victim of it. So they said that they did it all over Europe. And there was a group of recipients, there was a target group, because people don't check facts. And we had a genuine attack of Russian disinformation, which was on an unprecedented scale. So they recently broke into the Polish press agency and they published an article that military forces would be mobilized and sent to Ukraine. This is unheard of. Nothing like this has happened before. And there is one more thing I wanted to say, because I would like to go back to these platforms, as I call them, that I'm very critical of. We need regulations, European but also domestic, because we need to control them. Let's ask ourselves a question. Have you ever shared or liked any unverified information? Let's make a clear conscience check. Maybe there is no such person. But I would like to say one more thing. The situation will get even worse unless we do something about it, because a gigantic revolution will happen in our lives because both our professional and private lives will be affected by artificial intelligence very deeply. With those possibilities, these social platforms will be much more effective, and we need to require the European Union and other institutions to deal with that. We, as Gazeta Wyborcza, we are constantly under attacks of Russian trolls. Our subscribers, they actually buy subscriptions because it enables them to comment our articles. And the reason they buy subscriptions is to include comments like Ukrainians murdered so many people during the Second World War, during the Wołyń massacre. We cannot help Ukrainians. We delete such comments because we detect trolling accounts, and they set up new accounts. And this is a never-ending story.
Yeah, thank you very much. You also touched some strategies, but we will get back to it a little bit later. Now I would like to ask Peter, as the representative of Hungary, how's the situation with disinformation in Hungary? Also, when it comes to, as it was already said, and distinguished between internal and foreign disinformation actors.
Yes, so first of all, thanks a lot for having me on this event. This is my first time in this city, but I already fall in love with it, and also this conference I think is pretty fantastic, and glad to be able to discuss this issue in this distinguished panel. Yeah, the situation in Hungary when it comes to disinformation is a bit of dire, I have to say. And I will be a bit of provocative here because the experience from Hungary, I think, shows us that you don't necessarily need a foreign actor to spread disinformation if you have a government that is willing to do so.
This was the same situation in Poland during the previous 8 years.
Yes, you're right. I think with the exception or with the difference that Hungary has the most centralized media outlet within the whole European Union, with not just the public media that is spreading disinformation on an industrial scale, but also there have been almost 500 media outlets that were put under a foundation, practically a state-governed foundation that is receiving direct orders from the Prime Minister's office, and it is also spreading disinformation on industrial scale. And the sad thing in Hungary is that the politicians on the government receive feedbacks from the voters that spreading Russian narratives, of course, inspired by Sputnik, by Russia Today, even these days, where these outlets are on the sanctions list, from RIA Novosti, from Vladimir Putin, from Dmitry Kisayev, and so on. So you have, of course, all these inspirations, but they translate it to their local audience, to the Hungarian audience, and giving it a bit of more Hungarian flavor, and it sells well. It just translates into votes. So you don't have to be a useful idiot. You don't have to be even a mercenary. Maybe you are. Yeah, and of course, I don't want to say that there are no economic interlinkages between some business circles around and in the government and Russian business circles, but you don't have to explain the spread of disinformation on the basis of that. You can just explain on the basis that it works well domestically. And I don't think that Hungarians are that particularly vulnerable to disinformation more than other societies. What is the difference is that there is the very centralized media landscape. Plus, you have this very strong governmental narrative that pushed Russian disinformation. And just to give you an example, the story of the biolabs, US biolabs in the territory of Ukraine, in Hungary, these are not coming from the fringes, but prime time from the state television in the evening shows. So-called experts, some of them were previously experts of UFOs and of extraterrestrials and so on, but right now they are experts of Russia and Ukraine. They just say that, yes, for example, there are the biolabs in the territory of Ukraine created by the United States, and it creates viruses selectively killing Russians, which seems to be a bit of awkward argument in light of the justification of the invasion was that we are one nation. Russians and Ukrainians are one nation. But it seems that the US biolabs are able to create viruses just selectively killing Russians and not Ukrainians, which is quite of a miracle. And these stories are a prime time in the television, and we had just had a poll with quite striking result that 60% of the Hungarians almost believe that there are US biolabs in the territory of Ukraine. And of course, I mean, if there are such evil things happening in Ukraine, then you can argue that the Russian invasion was not that horrible, and it was just an act of self-defense. So I think and I think it's not just in Hungary. You can see it in Slovakia. You could see it in Austria in the last elections, and we could see the results. And it's spreading all over Europe. We can see it in the United States as well. So unfortunately, this pro-peace narrative that puts all the blame on the United States, on Brussels, and on Ukraine for the invasion and for the war, it is just getting stronger, and Hungary plays a very important role as also a model in terms of Orbán is on power for 14 years. So if you want to win election, then you have a model in Europe that this is the communication strategy you have to follow. So, and on a bit more optimistic note, I would also say that even in Hungary, the disinformation is not omnipotent. We cannot say that all the disinformation has a total impact on the society. And right now, I mean, in the last European Parliament election, we had a research project together with a fact-checking organization called Lakmus and another research organization called Mérték. And coming back to the point of social media companies, what we have found is that Hungary spent the most within the European Union, even more than Germany, on political advertisements. Most of these campaign spendings were coming from the governmental side. The governmental side spent more than 5 million euros on political advertisements in the European parliamentary campaign. About 2/3 of this money was spent on bashing Ukraine, praising Russia, and claiming that Western politicians are just want to start a third world war. And but the second most important narrative, about 1/3 of the money, went on another goal to discredit an opposition newcomer called Péter Magyar, who is a complicated figure in himself, but right now practically neck to neck to the governmental party in terms of popularity. So it's a real challenge. And Péter Magyar, this opposition newcomer, spent zero money on social media and also no billboards at all, while the government spent enormous amount of money to discredit him and without any impact. So I think if you have some counter narratives, that it can help. The problem in Hungary is that most of the politicians are not brave enough to challenge the government on the anti-Ukrainian and the anti-Western narratives.
Thank you very much. I really like that point that you don't need foreign actors if you have the government. And mentioning Slovakia, I can just agree with that, unfortunately, right now. And I'm really also happy that Roman and Peter, you both touch upon the topic of business models or financial resources behind spreading disinformation. And that would be my another question actually for you, Roman, because we all know, or I think that research on disinformation often overlooks the financial aspect of disinformation. And I think it's a really important topic. So can you maybe, tell us something more about how the spreaders of disinformation work actually? Where do they have money from actually to do what they do?
Jeśli w ogóle mówimy o tym, o czym wspominałem wcześniej.
Right, so I've mentioned that today media outlets such as Gazeta Wyborcza, BBC, these are niche media outlets nowadays. And we receive as a ricochet from social media, which grow more and more due to advertisements. Therefore, regular media outlets have less and less money, as Peter has mentioned. In Poland, political parties finance during election campaign TikTok, Google. Slovakia is one of these examples, delicately speaking. Such a campaign, like the last parliamentary campaign in Slovakia, where deep fakes were used as the main weapon, and you cannot actually distinguish it from true facts. I have seen a lot, but I haven't seen anything like that in my entire life. I even watch Russian television. Peter, yeah, I agree. We don't need foreign agents when we have the government, like in Poland, who turned public television into the propaganda machine, and it was the Russian approach. Russian format of the programs, of messages, that the government is always right, opposition is always wrong. Gazeta Wyborcza and Adam Michnik, my boss, are in the cooperation with Berlin and Germany, and they have a conspiracy against us. Apart from Orban, who was liked by our government, other countries had LGBT offensive and migration and so on and so forth. But going back to the question how to cope with it and how does it work, Poland and other EU member states have to realize that we have to invest in two areas which are key to fight disinformation, so that we have liberal democracy, that it is not destroyed. First, all the legal regulations in the area of internet and artificial intelligence. We have to control that. These platforms have to share money with us so that we do fact-checking. Second thing, this is my hobby horse, I always mention it, education. After the third class of primary school, we have to undergo education programs about how to use media platforms. I believe that social media, they killed critical approach, criticism. I am a historian by education, and I'm always critical about the facts that I read, because I was taught that at the university, and young people, they don't do fact-checking, and disinformation actors and high-tech companies, they use it. If you don't like a picture because it's a picture from your friend, you will like it, you will put a like. And disinformation spreads this way without education, without awareness raising among young people, starting with young age. That everything you see in social media, social platforms, something that is sent by your friends, is not necessarily a fact. You have to be critical reader. So media literacy is important. Social media killed irony, the sense of humor. Nowadays, you have to write it, to put a smile emoji, so that they understand that it's a joke.
Yeah, that's true. That's the use of emotions, actually, right? And that's also what disinformation actors do. And that's
Jeszcze jedną rzecz, właśnie, o której zapomniałem.
One more thing, I forgot to mention it, and you've asked about it. The EU has understood it partially. We demanded that the EU has to be serious about media outlets. If we fund mining, my parents were miners as well, and I'm not against it, but you have to finance media outlet. A serious part of the budget has to be offered in the form of grants so that we can fund technological initiatives as well. That costs money. We cannot fight giants, social media giants, without the money and without the technology. We have a lot of projects with our colleagues from Hungary, from Slovakia, from the Czech Republic. We do the fact-checking together, and it's a step forward. That's very important. Without understanding that top-quality media outlets are key for liberal democracy, we will otherwise go in the wrong direction. It's not my interest as Roman Wieliński or Gazeta Wyborcza. It's about all of us, about a general interest. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. To continue with because you already started the discussion about the strategies, I would like to ask Maia, actually, what do you think, what strategies have proven to be effective in countering disinformation, and also how can they evolve, to also meet the future threats, as it was mentioned already, AI and threats like that. And just before you answer, I'm looking at the time, and if you want to have some questions from the audience, which we want to, I'm sure, a little bit later, please. Thank you very much. I will just pose question to our speakers, and then I will open the floor. So let's stick to 3 or 4 minutes per each of the 3 speakers that remains. Thank you.
Żeby zacząć mówić o strategiach i jak możemy sobie z
Speaking
tym
of
radzić,
strategies and how can we cope with disinformation, what does disinformation do to us?
różni aktorzy walczą o nasze serca.
Different actors are fighting for our minds and our hearts. Disinformation, it's not a buzzword, it's something that has an impact on us, that polarizes society, so that we fight with each other, so that we do not sit down at the same table, and so that we are full of fear, that we are frightened. Fear has such an impact. For 4 years, we are frightened. First, we were fearing the pandemic. Now we are fearing the consequences of the war. We have this tunnel thinking. And when we have the tunnel thinking, it is very easy to manipulate us. And we are less and less critical. And it's an entire system. And how media platforms earn money. They earn profits by using emotions thanks to algorithms that strengthen the effect of disinformation. This PR and marketing, bad guys, bad actors that use disinformation, they know which buttons to push to trigger our emotions. In the context of the war, we don't need Russian tanks on the Polish land because we can already see these tanks with our imagination. And this society is afraid of the war because information war is already here. Now, positive strategies. It is too late, but still something can be done. The European Commission, fortunately, has been doing something for the last few years. A few regulations were adopted on digital services or AI Act that support us in fact-checking. In addition, there is a pressure on social platforms. There is so-called self-regulation. It is an attempt to improve the situation when in 2019 the European Commission used first self-regulation initiatives on platforms, but they earn money. They don't want to be involved in self-regulation. They are using and misusing our emotions. They don't care about the future. Geopolitically, the world is changing in front of our eyes, and there are different forces that know that it is up to people. And politicians will make such decisions which are popular with their societies, because our politicians look at opinion polls and they reflect sentiments. Ursula von der Leyen mentioned that social resistance and fighting disinformation and the social resilience as a key thing is going to be the priority, and it will be the priority of Polish presidency in the EU. So we will take more actions. In order to be effective and efficient, we need strategy and cooperation, whole of the society approach. So we have to cooperate, media outlets, the academia, civil society, the state institutions. On the one hand, we have to do fact-checking, we have to analyze disinformation. The Kremlin's disinformation, for example, means fake accounts that discuss yoga or religion or something else which we are interested in, and then they promote conspiracy theories. I like observing the community of those who don't believe in evolution, and their community is growing. Today I was there, 500,000 observers they have and 300,000 likes. And they believe that the land is flat. So we have to believe that truth is something relative to some people. So these flat earther believers, their community is growing, and we need to do something so that values are well communicated, real values. And the role of real media outlets, QAnon, maybe you've heard. The next conspiracy theory originated in the US, which might not be popular in Europe, but Der Spiegel wrote about it, and it was on the cover of Der Spiegel. So when we fight disinformation, bad fact-checking amplifies narratives such as QAnon, for example. So fact-checking is indispensable. Media outlet cannot spread false information. We need pre-banking, so to say. We have to understand which topics will polarize the society, and Russia, for example, or our domestic actors will amplify disinformation. It's not only about those who are against vaccines, they also appeal to those who are in favor of vaccines. Under Capital, from Russia, there were two rallies. One was pro-life, the other one was pro-abortion. Russians do not care what we're interested in. They want us to fight with each other, and they want us to mistrust institutions. Media literacy is key. Education in critical thinking is key. You have to realize that disinformation is there, that not everything that we see in Facebook, Twitter, I'm not even mentioning Twitter because it doesn't have any mechanisms after Elon Musk took it over, so it's not truth. And we have to understand our emotions, because it goes for several seconds, and disinformation works in such a way that it wants us to amplify, to pass it on, to forward this fake news, and to think in a narrow way. So education and emotional education are key.
Yeah, I totally agree. We also already touched upon the topic of regulation, and it will be my question for Krzysztof, actually, because as we consider the role of regulation in addressing disinformation, it's also important to balance effectiveness with the protection of freedom, right? So how? How do you see this? And please, let's try to stick to 3 minutes, and also I will have a question for Peter, and then we will open the floor for our audience. Thank you.
Well, the key role to play is by institutions and the letter of law. We appreciate what the European Union is working on. It's the first place globally where AI will be regulated. Whether it's good or bad, it's disputable. But the legal framework is of fundamental importance. The second thing is the institutions. Luckily, in democratic legal systems, there is provision, there is a big role to play by institutions, and they are fighting fake news, even though we don't know about that. One of such institutions is the Supreme Chamber of Control. The law says that they are allowed to control any area of the state's activity, and they are obliged to inform the public unless the controlled area is restricted, has restricted access to the military. So it's not just about public spending, it's about verifying whether information or the operations of specific institutions is correct. And pay attention to this institution. Their role and significance is growing. I don't want to elaborate on the affiliations of presidents of this institution, but we look at them in the sense how they analyze and verify information which is then shared with the public. I am overwhelmed by the pessimistic experience that our colleague from Hungary shared. I read some sociological research about the Hungarians as a population. I'm quite interested in your country. I already read about your country 10 and 20 years ago. And Orban, to a large extent, was able to formulate a new Hungarian with a new perspective at history and a new perspective at current affairs. And I believe I exhausted my time limit. So I just want to add one more thing. It's a digression which I love. Well, you mentioned flat earthians, and there's a growing number of those. We should not be surprised. Before the elections, 1/3 of Americans believed the earth is flat. I believe it will be 90%. Otherwise, we would all fall off.
Thank you very much also for sticking up to our time. And my last question goes to Peter. You focus basically on the psychological drivers of belief in disinformation, and Maia already mentioned that they use, of course, emotions, fear, and that we are frightened, as you already mentioned. Does it work? Is it the only thing that actually work when it comes to, disinformation actors and they wish to influence us, or what do you think that make actually individuals more prone to believe in disinformation?
Yeah, thank you. Easy question to respond in 2 minutes. So I just very briefly, and I don't want to repeat you because I think there are many wisdom have shared already on this topic, but I think beyond emotions, we also have some factors that make us, and I think it's important to acknowledge that all of us is vulnerable to disinformation to a certain extent. I would not say totally regardless of education. I would not say regardless of political position, but very well educated, let's say seemingly politically moderate people can share very stupid things on social media, for example, as I think all of you have experience on. So we all have, I think, our vulnerable spots to disinformation, and the simple thing is that the stronger attitudes you have, the stronger opinion you have in any topic, it makes you vulnerable to disinformation, which of course does not mean that the solution is that you shouldn't have any opinion on anything in the world, but you have to be aware of the fact that if you are very strongly engaged in something, if you have a very, very strong identity, if you have invested a lot of emotions in something, that then you are rather easy to manipulate. But beyond, and also it also means there is this notion of so-called motivated reasoning. If you are very strongly engaged in some opinions, then you use all your knowledge and intellect to defend the undefendable. And one research topic connected to that is that, for example, in the United States, people who are mostly the strongest believers and defenders of the idea that there is no global warming, if there is, humans do not contribute to it at all, are the Republicans with high university education, high scientific literacy, and they use all their knowledge or their argumentation to defend their position, and no one can change it. So I think education also and knowledge does not necessarily defend us from disinformation, but there is one other important element, which is the literature refers to it as cognitive laziness. So if we do not if we dedicate less attention to a piece of information, then it's just easier to manipulate us. And I think in the current environment where we live, we are just flooded with information, and many researchers say that the challenge of today is not to get the information, it's to filter the information. Because if you're overflooded with information that you can't filter, and I think the perfect setting for get disinformed, for example, when we are traveling on a tram, many people around us, we have just a very small attention gap, and we are just scrolling through the news, just focusing on the headlines, and do not have enough time to think about what we are reading. And that's I think also important. So I think we also have to acknowledge not just that we are vulnerable due to our opinion, but also we are vulnerable if you want to digest infinite amount of information. And one last point on the counter strategies, which Maia have referred to, and I think all the panelists have raised this issue already. We had an experiment at the university where we found that if you put, we did it with youngsters, but then with on a general population as well. If you put the people in an expert role, telling them that let's read the text, this is how you can spot this information, then explain it to your grandma, explain it to your friend, explain it to your relative, how it works, you empower them, you put them in the expert position, then it can help to immunize them against disinformation. So I think in the current populist age where we live in, we have to be very careful about we the wise guys tell the people what to think, because it can backfire many times. And we have to be creative about how to empower the audience. And also what Maia have mentioned about pre-bunking and inoculation against fake news is crucially important. And yes, I think the most important tool against disinformation in education is teaching about disinformation. And for example, if you want to teach against pseudoscience, you have to teach pseudoscience. So the students have to know the syntax of disinformation and conspiracy theories and pseudoscience. Also examples of that, of course, refuting it. But if we think that disinformation can be eliminated from the public discourse, I think we are wrong.
Thank you very much. Really excellent and important points. And now I would like to turn to our audience. And with roughly 8 minutes remaining, I will collect 2 or 3 questions that you have. So I saw the one gentleman over here. Other questions? One gentleman in the background. And yeah, okay. And one lady standing here in the white nice jacket. So 4 questions. Okay, so 4 questions. We should collect it at once, and our speakers will reply as they wish, basically.
Marek Pędziwal, Deutsche Welle. Ja chciałem nawiązać do tego,
Marek Pędziwal, Deutsche Welle. I would like to refer to what Roman mentioned. Several months ago, I had a conversation with Marek Wieczorko. I had an interview with him. And he told me technological companies are great help. I was surprised, and he told me Google removes on mass scale false companies which are promoted by KGB. Maybe that is a method. Maybe we could actually work as Belarusians. May I respond right away?
I would like to collect several questions, and then we can, sorry. Gentleman in the back, and also...
So thank you for the opportunity. I would like to ask Mr. Peter Kreko if he could elaborate on the effect of the organized system of government-affiliated political influencers, megaphones' effects on the spread of disinformation in the Hungarian social media. And on that note, I would also like to ask the Polish panelists if they could share information on whether something similar exists in Poland, and if yes, how influential are they?
Mogą Państwo podnieść rękę, bo nie pamiętam, kto zadawał pytania.
Ja mam dwa pytania. Pierwsze o
Two
edukację
questions.
ustawiczną.
First, continuous education, adult learning, including intergenerational education, like grandchildren teaching their grandparents of how to detect disinformation. The second question is big production corporations and their marketers. Many such corporations or marketers supported Polish media which spread disinformation. The question is how nowadays corporate marketing should look into their spendings. So is it just about the scope or also quality of the media in which they advertise that should be taken into consideration? My question is to editor Wieliński. Do you see a positive role played by social media in fighting for democracy? And what alternatives do you see? For instance, what other tools could be used in the future to spread news about our events? We have many different organizations. We promote human rights. We promote many different valuable events. If not social media, then what?
Thank you very much for your interesting questions. So we have a lot to do to catch it up. So first, I would suggest Roman to answer the question about the technology companies, and also last one about the social media. Then there was a question about the Hungarian government for better, and also comparison to Poland, to either Krzysztof or Maia, and then education question and marketing, and marketers question. So Roman, please, companies and social media.
Well, very briefly about the Belarusian activity. There is a method. Google that you mentioned does many things that are meant to help journalists, but that's a trap of some kind, because they attract us and they want us to rely on them in many different ways. And I've been in this business for many years. Well, Google does a good job with KGB companies, but there is a lot of bad work that Google is doing as well. Well, in response to your question, internet is a great thing, but it's out of control. Now, I remember the revolution of 2008. I was against regulating internet. You can regulate TV, radio, and so on, but we need a platform where freedom will spread. But this is out of control now. So what I see, well, I'm not about removing or eliminating Google or Facebook, but I would like to impose or introduce such regulations that they become serious about fighting disinformation, fighting fake news. Fake news and disinformation are not identical concepts. And they also need to take responsibility for education. They need to assume responsibility for education. As a side note, what happened with tobacco companies nowadays? See, only pressure of the state or of the European Union brings about education. Contemporary packagings have a preventing role to play. So I believe social media, maybe not to the extent as the tobacco companies, but they need to be responsible for what is happening there and for education as well. I would like to address the governmental question, and I would like to show you how complicated the situation is. I have a specific example. In Poland, we have 3 leading TV stations, Public TV, Polsat, and TVN. The truth is that whenever any political circle had influence on all 3 stations, I would say we have the same process as we do in Hungary. Look at what is happening today. Public TV, my circles, democratic circles are happy that we are no longer under the propaganda which was in the public TV. New authorities were reintroduced. But look at the 2 other stations. Polsat. We read about Polsat, and we know that there were consultations between the owners of that station and the former government. Even if you're not into conspiracy theories, you can refer to the report by the Supreme Chamber of Control, and you can see the volume of governmental advertisement and what is the percentage of news supporting, for instance, decisions about investments in the owners' businesses. Now you follow the family troubles. The wife of Soros is a right-winger, and his children are from a different circles. Now TVN also informs about peace. They also refer to a fake Hungarian investor. So you see the situation, and now the state companies reduce their spendings on advertisement. That is a governmental decision. Is this a good decision or not? Well, the media that did not feel they were affiliated to peace, they fought for values, they were fighting for advertisements from state companies. Now the government is limiting spending on advertisements, so on commercials. So now the TVs will think, the situation is not equal because we counted on the benefits in the form of information or commercials ordered by state-owned companies or by the administration. So that's a very difficult situation. I'm not giving you any answers here. But what if the black scenario is true? What if TVN is sold, a new investor is found, and Polsat returns to presenting a favorable picture of the peace? Will that change the political situation in the country? Yes, it will. Should that affect the amounts spent on commercials? You respond in your own mind. I have no response ready for you, but I want to show you the complexity of mechanisms that affect this area. In Hungary, most of the Hungarian media was purchased, if not bribed, in a process which took a long time, until they led to a situation where only minor negligent platforms would provide objective information. You asked about social media. I love social media. They made protesting possible, but it doesn't mean that they don't cause harm and that they should not be controlled by some, they should not be regulated, because one tool can do good and it can also harm, like in the Bible.
I'd like to add, as regards social media, that we are living in the world where social media exists, so we cannot do anything about it. We just have to learn how to use them, not as populist tools in PR, marketing, promoting your own values, but these are tools that can be used to convince people. So civil society organizations have to use media, social media, and they can offer their positive message, not only bad, emotionally negative and manipulative message that is based on fear. Media literacy and education, it's continuous education and social campaigns, awareness-raising campaigns. We can learn a lot thanks to such campaigns. Even today's meeting is part of this communication and awareness-raising. We first have to teach our kids to distinguish disinformation and fake news. So a lot of changes are underway, and the Ministry of Education hopefully will introduce it as a critical thinking method, which is necessary, and media literacy education.
We are very behind our time schedule, so make it really quick if possible, because we're already run out of time. Sorry.
One sentence. We need companies which can earn profits having good values, and they will promote these good values, and they can earn money anyway. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm actually afraid that we are already run out of time, but you can, of course, continue the discussion over a cup of coffee in the main hall downstairs. So I'm very sorry. And just to really quickly, in half a minute, summarize what has been said here. So basically, we have to distinguish between the foreign influence and internal actors. Sometimes we don't need the foreign actor if we have, bad government on how to say that. And really crucial is the media literacy, education, institutions, and also regulations and the legal framework, and of course, teaching about the disinformation. With that note, I would like to thank our panelists for accepting the invitation, for sharing their insights, and to you also for coming to our discussion. And enjoy your stay at the Freedom Games. Thank you.
Jedzą kanapki z kawiorem.
Nadzwyczajna kasa.
Obrażanie dziennikarz telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Przygotowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland.
TVP Info. Włącz się na nowo.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Polskie Radio.
Jedynka.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 tysięcy osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.
Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć dwójkę. Dwójka, Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.
Zapraszamy do Trójki. Od nowa.
Trójka. Program Trzeci Polskiego Radia.
Czy wytrzymasz klockowe tortury? Ze stoickim spokojem. Czy w twardych negocjacjach zachowasz zimną krew? Czy poddasz się dobrowolnej eksmisji ze swojego łóżka? Brawo! Test na obecność serca zaliczony. To znaczy, że ty też możesz być rodzicem zastępczym. Dowiedz się jak na testserca.pl.